The text message from my neighbor Linda came through at 7:30 on a Saturday morning, and my coffee was still brewing when I read it. Deborah is taking pictures of your backyard again. I stood at my kitchen window in my house on Maple Ridge Drive in Evanston, Illinois, watching my 6-year-old son Marcus play on his new swing set, while my 4-year-old daughter Lily dug in her sandbox. The morning sun filtered through the oak trees that lined our quiet suburban street, and everything seemed peaceful until I spotted her. Deborah Mitchell, president of our homeowners association and the most insufferable busybody I had ever encountered, stood at the edge of my property line with her phone raised, clearly documenting whatever imaginary violation she thought she had discovered this time. My name is Gabriel Stevens, and I had been dealing with Deborah's complaints for the past 8 months since moving into this neighborhood. As a social worker for the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, I spent my days investigating actual problems involving children and families in crisis. Coming home to Deborah's petty grievances about my grass being a 1/4 inch too tall or my mailbox being the wrong shade of black felt like some kind of cosmic joke. I grabbed my coffee and headed outside, my bare feet hitting the cool grass of my backyard. Marcus looked up from his swing and waved enthusiastically. "Dad, watch how high I can go." "Looking good, buddy," I called back, then turned my attention to the property line where Deborah stood. She was 52 years old, blonde hair cut in that severe bob that seemed mandatory for women in positions of petty authority, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit on a Saturday morning like she was heading to a board meeting instead of harassing her neighbors. "Morning, Deborah," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Can I help you with something?" She lowered her phone but kept it clutched in her hand like evidence. "Gabriel, I am documenting multiple HOA violations currently occurring on your property. That swing set was never approved by the Architectural Review Committee, and the sandbox is creating an eyesore that diminishes property values for the entire neighborhood." I took a slow sip of my coffee, counting to 5 in my head like my therapist had taught me. The swing set is under 8 feet tall, which according to Section 12 of the HOA bylaws does not require approval. The sandbox is a temporary children's play structure, also exempted. We went through this last month when you complained about the slide. The bylaws are open to interpretation, and as HOA president, I am responsible for maintaining neighborhood standards. Deborah's voice had that sharp quality that made my teeth hurt. But that is not even the primary concern today. I have been observing your children, and I have serious concerns about their welfare. My hand tightened around my coffee mug. "Excuse me. Those children are outside in the morning air without proper supervision. You are standing here talking to me instead of watching them. The little girl has dirt all over her clothing. The boy is swinging dangerously high without a helmet. This constitutes neglect, Gabriel, and I am prepared to contact Child Protective Services if you do not take immediate corrective action." Something cold settled in my chest, that familiar feeling I got when I was sitting across from someone during an investigation and realized they were lying. I glanced back at my kids. Marcus was pumping his legs on the swing, laughing with pure joy. Lily was building what appeared to be a sand castle, her sundress dotted with sand but otherwise perfectly fine. Both children were in a fenced backyard, visible from the kitchen window, playing normal childhood games on a beautiful Saturday morning. "Let me be very clear," I said quietly. "My children are properly supervised, engaged in age-appropriate play, and are in no danger whatsoever. What you are describing is not neglect by any legal or professional definition, and threatening to call CPS over normal parenting is a serious matter." Deborah's lips pressed into a thin line. I know neglect when I see it, Gabriel. My sister's cousin works for the county, and she has told me all about the warning signs. Those children need structure and discipline, not dirt and dangerous playground equipment. If you do not remove that swing set by Monday and implement proper safety protocols, I will be making that phone call. She turned on her heel and marched back toward her house, which sat 3 doors down from mine with its perfectly manicured lawn and not a single toy or sign of life in the yard. I watched her go, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. Linda appeared from her house next door, a coffee mug in her own hand. She was 60, a retired teacher with kind eyes and an infinite tolerance for neighborhood drama. I am sorry I texted you so early, but I saw her lurking around and figured you should know. Thanks, Linda. I appreciate the heads up. I ran my hand through my hair. She just threatened to call CPS because my kids are playing in the backyard. Linda's expression hardened. That woman is unhinged. Last month she tried to fine me because my roses grew through the fence into her yard. They are roses, Gabriel. They grow. She wanted me to pay a $500 violation fee. Did you pay it? Absolutely not. I told her to take it up with Mother Nature and shut my door in her face. Linda took a sip of her coffee. But this CPS threat is different. She is messing with your kids now. That crosses a line. She was right. Every instinct I had developed over 10 years working in child welfare was telling me that Deborah Mitchell was not going to let this go. I had seen plenty of malicious reports during my career, false claims made by angry ex-spouses, vindictive neighbors, or people with mental health issues who genuinely believed they were seeing abuse where none existed. The system took every report seriously, which was necessary to protect actual victims, but it also meant that false reports could destroy lives. The difference was that I knew the system inside and out. I knew what actual neglect looked like, and I knew how to document and report real concerns. If Deborah wanted to play this game, she had picked the wrong opponent. Monday morning arrived with dark clouds threatening rain. I dropped Marcus and Lily off at Lincoln Elementary and Bright Beginnings Preschool respectively, then headed to my office in downtown Chicago. The DCFS regional office occupied 3 floors of a concrete building near the courthouse, filled with social workers carrying impossibly heavy caseloads and trying to help families in genuine crisis. My supervisor, Janet Rodriguez, caught me as I was settling in at my desk. Gabriel, you look stressed. Everything okay? I gave her a brief rundown of the situation with Deborah, and Janet's expression grew more concerned as I talked. You need to document all of this immediately. Every interaction, every threat, every complaint. If she does make a report, you want a clear record that this is harassment, not legitimate concern. Already started. I pulled up the file I had created on my home computer, complete with dates, times, and details of every interaction with Deborah since we had moved in. But I am also thinking about making a report of my own. Janet raised her eyebrows. About the HOA president. About someone who is using threats of false CPS reports as a weapon to control her neighbors. Someone who appears to have an unhealthy obsession with surveilling children in the neighborhood. Someone who has demonstrated a pattern of harassment and manipulation. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I had taken Sunday afternoon, documenting Deborah standing at my property line with binoculars, watching my backyard while my kids played. Jesus, Janet muttered. That is creepy. It gets worse. I talked to some other neighbors yesterday. 3 other families with young children have received similar threats from her. One family actually removed their kids' trampoline because they were scared she would follow through. Another family is considering moving because the harassment got so bad. Janet was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. If you genuinely believe there is cause for concern based on behavior you have directly witnessed, then yes, you should file a report. But Gabriel, you need to be absolutely certain this is about legitimate concern for a pattern of harmful behavior, and not just about getting back at someone who has been making your life difficult. I spent 3 hours last night reviewing my notes and observations. I consulted the diagnostic criteria for several relevant disorders. I am not diagnosing her, but I am seeing a pattern of behavior that suggests someone who may pose a risk to community well-being, particularly in how she targets families with children. This is not retaliation, Janet. This is me doing my job. She studied my face for a long moment, then sighed. Document everything, be factual and objective, and prepare for this to get messy. HOA disputes are already nightmares, and you are about to escalate it significantly. I filed my report that afternoon, outlining my observations of Deborah Mitchell's behavior patterns, the threats she had made to multiple families, and my professional concern that her fixation on neighborhood children and her willingness to weaponize the child welfare system represented a potential risk. I included statements from 3 neighbors who agreed to go on record about their interactions with her. I noted the binoculars incident, her presence at property lines during times when children were playing, and her escalating threats. The report went to a different regional office to avoid any appearance of impropriety, since I obviously could not investigate my own complaint. I provided my contact information and disclosed my position as a DCFS social worker, making it clear that I understood the seriousness of filing a report and was not doing so lightly. Then I waited. Tuesday brought rain and a certified letter from the Maple Ridge HOA, delivered to my office since I had not been home to sign for it. Inside was a formal notice of violation for unapproved exterior structures and failure to maintain property aesthetic standards, with a demand that I remove the swing set within 72 hours or face a fine of $200 per day. I took photos of the letter and added it to my documentation file. Wednesday morning, I received a call from a DCFS investigator named Patricia Chen. Mr. Stevens, I am calling about a report filed concerning your children Marcus and Lily Stevens, ages 6 and 4. I need to schedule a home visit to follow up on allegations of neglectful supervision. My stomach dropped even though I had been expecting this. I understand. When would you like to come by? Is this evening at 6 possible? I know it is short notice, but we try to conduct initial visits within 48 hours of a report. 6 is fine. My address is 847 Maple Ridge Drive in Evanston. I have it in the file. Mr. Stevens, I see here that you are a social worker with the department. I want you to know that I will be conducting this investigation with the same thoroughness I would apply to any case, without any preferential treatment. I would expect nothing less, Miss Chen. I will see you at 6. I called my ex-wife, Vanessa, to give her a heads up. We had been divorced for 2 years, but maintained a cordial relationship focused on co-parenting our kids. She had primary custody of our older daughter, who was 12, and lived with her in Wisconsin, while I had primary custody of Marcus and Lily with a shared custody arrangement that worked well for everyone. Deborah from your HOA called CPS. Vanessa's voice rose an octave. Gabriel, that is insane. Those kids are fine. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with them can see they are happy and well cared for. I know, but the system has to investigate every report. Patricia Chen is coming by tonight to do a home visit. I just wanted you to know in case she contacts you as part of the investigation. You want me to drive down? I can be there in 2 hours. No, it is okay. This is straightforward. The house is clean, the kids are healthy and happy, there is no validity to the complaint, it will be fine. I hoped I sounded more confident than I felt. Call me after the visit. And Gabriel, make sure you document that this woman filed a false report. That has to have consequences. Patricia Chen arrived at my house at exactly 6 o'clock. She was in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and sharp, observant eyes that took in everything. I had worked with her briefly on a case 3 years ago and remembered her as thorough and fair. I welcomed her inside, where Marcus and Lily were setting the table for dinner. The house smelled like the spaghetti sauce I had simmering on the stove, and the living room showed the comfortable chaos of a home where children actually lived, with books and toys organized in bins and art projects displayed on the refrigerator. "Hi, Miss Chen," I said. "These are my kids, Marcus and Lily. Kids, this is Miss Chen. She is here to talk to us for a little while." Marcus, who had inherited my dark hair and his mother's gregarious personality, waved cheerfully. "Hi, we are having spaghetti for dinner. Dad makes really good sauce." Patricia smiled. "That sounds delicious. Thank you for having me in your home." The interview lasted an hour and a half. Patricia spoke with both children separately, asked age-appropriate questions about their daily routines, their school and preschool, how they spent their time at home. She inspected their bedrooms, the bathrooms, the kitchen. She checked the refrigerator and pantry. She asked to see the backyard and spent several minutes examining the swing set and sandbox that had triggered this entire nightmare. Finally, she sat down with me at the kitchen table while the kids watched a movie in the living room. "Mr. Stevens, I am going to be direct with you. There is absolutely no evidence of neglect or inadequate supervision in this home. Your children are healthy, well-adjusted, properly fed and clothed, and clearly have a strong relationship with you. The outdoor play equipment is age-appropriate and maintained in good condition. The home environment is safe and nurturing." Relief washed over me, even though I had known this would be the outcome. "Thank you. Can I ask what specifically was alleged in the report?" Patricia consulted her notes. The reporting party claimed the children were frequently left unsupervised outdoors, that they were dressed in dirty clothing and appeared unkempt, that they were engaged in dangerous activities without proper safety equipment, and that you were frequently absent from the home for extended periods, leaving them alone. All of which is completely false. Correct. In my professional opinion, this report was made in bad faith, likely as retaliation or harassment rather than out of genuine concern for the children's welfare. She paused. "I notice you filed a report last week concerning a Deborah Mitchell. Is she the reporting party on this case?" "I cannot confirm that because reports are confidential, but I think we both know the answer." "Yes. Deborah Mitchell is my HOA president and has been making escalating threats about calling CPS if I do not comply with her demands regarding my property." Patricia nodded slowly. "I have been assigned to investigate your report as well. The timing is certainly notable. I will be making a recommendation that this case be closed as unfounded, and I will be including documentation of the apparent retaliatory nature of the report. I also want you to know that filing false reports is a misdemeanor in Illinois, punishable by up to a year in jail and fines up to $2,500. I am aware. I plan to pursue that if appropriate. I think it may be very appropriate, Mr. Stevens. I will be in touch after I complete my investigation into your report regarding Miss Mitchell." She stood and gathered her things. "Your kids are lucky to have you. I wish all the homes I visited were like this one." After she left, I pulled both kids onto the couch for a group hug. Marcus squirmed after about 10 seconds, but Lily nestled into my side. "Dad, why did that lady need to look at our rooms?" "She is just doing her job, sweetheart, making sure everyone is safe and healthy." "Are we safe and healthy?" "Very much so." I kissed the top of her head. "How about we have that spaghetti now?" Thursday afternoon, I received an email from the HOA's attorney, a firm called Hendricks and Associates. The email informed me that I was in violation of multiple covenants, that I had failed to respond to the notice to cure within the designated time frame, and that daily fines of $200 had begun accruing as of that morning. The total owed was currently $200, but would increase by $200 for each day the violation continued. Furthermore, the HOA was prepared to file a lien against my property if payment was not received within 30 days. I forwarded the email to my own attorney, Marcus Wright, a real estate lawyer I had consulted when I first moved into the neighborhood and started having issues with Deborah. Marcus called me within an hour. "Gabriel, this is harassment. The swing set clearly falls under the permitted structures exception in your HOA bylaws. I have reviewed the covenants extensively, and you are not in violation. Can they actually put a lien on my house over this? They can try, but it would not hold up in court. The problem is that fighting it costs time and money, which is exactly what they are counting on. Most people just give in because it is easier than dealing with the legal battle." Marcus paused. "But I do not think you are most people, and I do not think this is just about a swing set anymore." "It is not. Deborah called CPS on me Tuesday. They investigated and found nothing because there is nothing to find. This is retaliation because I filed my own report about her behavior." "She called CPS on you." "A social worker." Marcus actually laughed, though there was no humor in it. "That is either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant. Probably both. Listen, I think we need to go on offense here. File a harassment claim, sue for damages, and make it clear that you are not backing down. I want to see how Patricia's investigation of my report turns out first. If there is evidence that Deborah has been engaging in a pattern of harassment toward multiple families, especially involving false CPS reports, that is bigger than just a personal dispute. Fair enough. But Gabriel, watch your back. People like this HOA president, they escalate when they feel threatened, and you have definitely threatened her little kingdom. Friday evening, I was helping Lily with a puzzle at the kitchen table when my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Deborah standing on my front porch, arms crossed, that pinched expression on her face that seemed to be her default setting. I opened the door but did not invite her in. "Deborah, what can I do for you?" "You can explain why a social worker showed up at my house yesterday, asking invasive questions about my mental health and my interactions with neighborhood children. You filed a report about me, Gabriel, with your own department. That is abuse of power, and I will be filing complaints with your employer, the state licensing board, and anyone else I can think of. I filed a report based on observations of concerning behavior, which is my responsibility as a mandated reporter and as a citizen. If an investigator followed up, that means the report was deemed credible enough to warrant investigation. That is how the system works. There is nothing wrong with my concern for neighborhood standards and child safety. I am protecting property values and maintaining the quality of life in this community. You are the problem, Gabriel, with your negligent parenting and your refusal to follow simple rules." Her voice was getting louder, and I could see Linda peeking out her window next door. "Deborah, I am going to ask you to leave my property now. Any further communication should go through attorneys. Your swing set is still in violation. The fines are now $600 and will continue to increase. If you think you can intimidate me into dropping this by filing false reports and making up lies about me, you are badly mistaken. I have not made up anything. I have documented facts about your behavior, including the fact that you have been photographing and surveilling my children without permission, standing at my property line with binoculars watching my backyard, and threatening to make false CPS reports unless I comply with demands that have no basis in the actual HOA covenants. All of that is true, all of it is documented, and all of it is concerning. Deborah's face flushed red. I will see you at the HOA meeting next Thursday, Gabriel, 7 o'clock at the community center. We will be discussing your violations and voting on additional penalties. I suggest you attend. She stalked back to her car, which was parked in front of my house even though she lived just 3 doors down. I closed the door and leaned against it, trying to calm my racing heart. Marcus appeared from the living room. Dad, why was that lady yelling? She is just upset about some grown-up stuff, buddy. Nothing for you to worry about. I ruffled his hair. How about we go get ice cream? I think we all deserve a treat. Over the weekend, I prepared for the HOA meeting with the same thoroughness I would apply to a court appearance. I compiled every piece of documentation. Photos of the swing set with measurements showing it was under the height limit, copies of the relevant bylaw sections, the timeline of Deborah's complaints and escalating threats, statements from neighbors about similar harassment, and the notice from Patricia Chen that my CPS case had been closed as unfounded. Monday morning, Patricia called me. Mr. Stevens, I wanted to update you on my investigation into your report regarding Deborah Mitchell. I have interviewed her, along with 4 other families in your neighborhood who reported similar experiences. I have also reviewed her social media posts, which include concerning statements about neighborhood children and their parents. What is your assessment? I am recommending that the matter be referred to local law enforcement for investigation of filing a false police report under Illinois Statute 720 Ilks 5/26(1). I am also recommending that Ms. Mitchell be advised that further false reports could result in criminal charges. Additionally, I will be sending a letter to your HOA board advising them of the situation and recommending they review Ms. Mitchell's conduct as board president. Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate your thoroughness on this. To be honest, Gabriel, this is one of the more clear-cut cases of malicious reporting I have seen. Most false reports come from genuine misunderstandings or people who are genuinely concerned, but lack the knowledge to distinguish normal behavior from abuse. This was deliberate, calculated, and done with the intent to harass. That is different, and it needs consequences. Tuesday afternoon, I received a call from the Evanston Police Department. Detective Sarah Morrison introduced herself and asked if I could come down to the station to give a statement regarding Deborah Mitchell. I arranged for Linda to watch the kids after school and drove to the police station, where I spent 2 hours providing a detailed account of everything that had happened. Detective Morrison was in her mid-30s, thorough and patient as she took notes. Mr. Stevens, I want to be clear about what we are investigating here. Filing a false report with DCFS is a criminal offense. We take these cases seriously because false reports waste resources and can cause significant harm to families, while also making it harder for the system to respond to actual cases of abuse and neglect. I understand completely. That is why I documented everything and consulted with my supervisor before filing my own report. We will also be looking into potential harassment charges based on the pattern of behavior you and other neighbors have described. Has Ms. Mitchell attempted to contact you since the DCFS investigation was closed? She came to my house Friday evening to confront me about filing a report on her. She was angry and made additional threats about HOA fines and penalties. Do you have security cameras that might have captured that interaction? I installed a doorbell camera last month after she started showing up at odd hours. I have footage of Friday's confrontation, along with several other instances of her standing at my property line taking photos and videos. Detective Morrison's expression brightened. Can you send me that footage? Absolutely. I will get it to you today. As I left the police station, my phone rang. It was Marcus Wright, my attorney. Gabriel, I just received a very interesting letter from Hendricks and Associates. They are dropping the HOA violation case against you and waiving all fines. What? Why? The letter does not say explicitly, but reading between the lines, I think the HOA board got Patricia Chen's letter and decided they wanted no part of this mess. Deborah Mitchell may be the president, but she is not the entire board, and I imagine the other members are not thrilled about potential liability. So the swing set can stay. The swing set can stay. I would recommend getting everything in writing confirming that you are not in violation and that no fines are owed, just to cover yourself. But yes, Gabriel, you won. It did not feel like winning yet. I still had to get through Thursday's HOA meeting, and I knew Deborah was not going to go quietly. Thursday evening arrived cold and drizzly. Perfect weather for a confrontation. I had arranged for Vanessa to drive down and stay with the kids, partially because I did not want to leave them with a sitter during all this chaos, and partially because I knew having their mother there would reassure them that everything was fine. The Maple Ridge Community Center was a modest building at the edge of the neighborhood, with a meeting room that could hold about 50 people. When I arrived at 6:45, the parking lot was already nearly full. Apparently word had gotten around that tonight's meeting would be interesting. Inside, rows of folding chairs faced a table at the front where the 5-member HOA board sat. Deborah occupied the center seat, wearing a navy blazer and a tight expression. The other board members looked decidedly uncomfortable. I recognized 2 of them. Robert Chen, a retired engineer who lived at the end of my street, and Amanda Foster, a young attorney who had always struck me as reasonable. I took a seat in the 3rd row. Linda slid into the chair next to me, patting my arm. Half the neighborhood is here, Gabriel. Everyone is sick of her nonsense. The meeting started at 7 exactly. Deborah called it to order and launched into a review of neighborhood business, landscaping for the common areas, discussion of snow removal contracts for the coming winter, approval of the previous meeting's minutes. Standard stuff that normally would have put me to sleep. Then she got to new business, and her eyes fixed on me. Item 7 on tonight's agenda concerns ongoing violations by Gabriel Stevens at 847 Maple Ridge Drive. Mr. Stevens has erected an unapproved structure and has refused multiple notices to cure the violation. I stood up. Point of order, Deborah. I received a letter from the HOA's attorney this Tuesday stating that the violation case has been dropped and all fines waived. So I am not sure why this is still on the agenda. Confused murmuring rippled through the room. Amanda Foster leaned forward. Deborah, is that true? Did Hendricks send a letter dropping the case? Deborah's jaw tightened. The attorney sent a letter making a recommendation, which I as board president have chosen not to accept. The board needs to vote on how to proceed with Mr. Stevens' violations. Actually, Amanda said, her voice taking on a professional edge, if our attorney advised dropping the case, it was likely because he determined we would not prevail in court and continuing would expose the HOA to liability. We should not be voting on this at all. The case should be dropped as recommended. I second that, Robert Chen said immediately. Deborah, you have been pushing this swing set issue for weeks, and frankly, I have reviewed the bylaws myself. The structure does not require approval. It is time to let this go. Deborah's face flushed. This is not just about a swing set. This is about a resident who has shown complete disregard for community standards, who has filed false and malicious complaints against me personally, and who has attempted to weaponize his position as a social worker to intimidate me. That is not true, I said, still standing. I filed a report with DCFS based on legitimate concerns about your pattern of behavior, including photographing and surveilling neighborhood children without permission, making threats to multiple families about calling CPS unless they complied with your demands, and filing what was determined to be an unfounded and likely malicious report about my parenting. The murmuring in the room grew louder. A woman I did not know stood up. She threatened to call CPS on us too if we did not take down our kid's basketball hoop. She said our son playing basketball after 4 p.m. was disturbing the peace, and that letting him play unsupervised was neglect. Another parent stood. She told us our daughter's bicycle in the driveway violated parking ordinances, and that if we did not keep better control of our children, she would report us to the authorities. Deborah stood, her voice rising. All of you are exaggerating and twisting my words. I have worked tirelessly for 3 years to maintain property values and standards in this neighborhood. You are all ungrateful and hostile to anyone who tries to enforce basic rules. Deborah, Amanda said quietly, I think you need to step down from the board. The room went completely silent. Excuse me. Deborah's voice was ice. I received a letter this week from the Department of Children and Family Services advising the board that you are under investigation for filing false reports and that you have demonstrated a pattern of harassment toward families with children. I also learned this morning that the Evanston Police Department has opened a criminal investigation into the same conduct. Amanda looked around at the other board members. We cannot have someone under criminal investigation serving as HOA president. It is a liability issue, but more than that, it is a community trust issue. I am not stepping down. You would need a majority vote to remove me, and that is not going to happen. Robert Chen raised his hand. I vote to remove Deborah Mitchell as HOA president, effective immediately, due to conduct unbecoming of the position and potential criminal activity. Second, Amanda said. The other 2 board members, who had been silent throughout the meeting, both raised their hands in agreement. 4-1, Robert said. Deborah, you are removed as president. I am also making a motion that we suspend your board membership pending the outcome of the police investigation. Second, Amanda said again. 4 hands went up. Deborah's face had gone from red to white. She stood rigid for a long moment, then grabbed her bag and stalked out of the room. The door slammed behind her, and then the community center erupted in conversation. Amanda banged a gavel I had not noticed on the table. Order, please. We still need to elect an interim president and finish our agenda. The meeting continued for another hour, but I barely paid attention. Linda kept whispering updates and commentary, but my mind was already moving to what came next. Deborah was not going to accept this quietly, and I knew from experience that people who lost power they felt entitled to could become dangerous in their desperation to regain it. I was right to be concerned. Friday morning at 2:30 a.m., my doorbell camera detected motion. I had set it to alert me to any activity between midnight and 6 a.m., so my phone buzzed on my nightstand. I grabbed it, squinting at the screen. Deborah Mitchell stood on my front porch, clearly visible in the camera's night vision. She was holding something in her hands. As I watched, she bent down and appeared to be placing whatever she was holding against my front door. I was out of bed and down the stairs in seconds, flipping on the porch light as I yanked open the door. Deborah jumped back, startled. At her feet was a cardboard box, and even from several feet away, I could smell something foul coming from it. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "I am documenting the fact that you are creating health hazards with rotting garbage left on your porch," Deborah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You just brought that box here yourself. I have you on camera. What is in it?" "I do not have to explain myself to you." I pulled out my phone and called 911. "Yes, I need police at 847 Maple Ridge Drive in Evanston. Someone is trespassing on my property and has left what appears to be garbage or potentially hazardous material on my front porch." Deborah's eyes went wide. "You called the police? Are you insane? You are on my property at 2:30 in the morning leaving mysterious boxes on my porch. What did you think would happen?" I stayed in the doorway, keeping myself between her and my house, while staying on the line with the dispatcher. 2 Evanston police officers arrived within 10 minutes. I recognized one of them from my visit to the station earlier in the week. They took statements from both of us, while a third officer photographed the box and its contents, which turned out to be food waste and what looked like animal feces. "Miss Mitchell," the officer I recognized said, "Mr. Stevens' doorbell camera shows you arriving with this box and placing it on his porch. Can you explain why you did that?" "I found it on his property earlier and was returning it to inform him of the health code violation." At 2:30 in the morning, Deborah pressed her lips together and said nothing. "Madam, I need you to understand that you are currently under investigation for filing false reports and harassment. This behavior, coming onto Mr. Stevens' property in the middle of the night and leaving what appears to be garbage on his porch, is not helping your case. This could be considered criminal trespass and potentially harassment or intimidation of a witness." "I am not intimidating anyone. I am simply trying to maintain neighborhood standards that everyone else seems determined to ignore." The officer exchanged glances with his partner. "Miss Mitchell, I am going to issue you a citation for trespassing. You need to stay off Mr. Stevens' property. If you have concerns about HOA violations, you need to address them through appropriate channels during appropriate hours, not by showing up at people's homes in the middle of the night." After the police left and I had thoroughly washed my hands and front porch, I sat at my kitchen table trying to process what had just happened. It was 3:30 in the morning and I had to be up for work in a few hours, but adrenaline was still coursing through my system. Vanessa came downstairs, having apparently woken up during the commotion. "Gabriel, what is going on?" I filled her in and she sank into the chair across from me. "That woman is unhinged. You need a restraining order." "I am going to talk to Marcus about it tomorrow, today, whatever." I rubbed my eyes. I just wanted to live in a nice neighborhood with a yard for the kids to play in. How did it turn into this? Because some people need control, and they will do anything to maintain it, even when it is hurting everyone around them. Vanessa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "But you are doing the right thing, Gabriel. Standing up to bullies is hard, but it is necessary, especially when they are targeting kids and families." The citation Deborah received for trespassing triggered something, because over the next week, 3 more families in the neighborhood came forward with complaints about her behavior. One couple reported that Deborah had filed a complaint with the county health department claiming they had a rodent infestation, which led to a home inspection that found nothing wrong but was deeply embarrassing and invasive. Another family reported that she had sent anonymous letters to their employers claiming they were neglecting their children, which resulted in uncomfortable conversations with HR and nearly cost one father his security clearance. Detective Morrison called me on Wednesday. Mr. Stevens, I wanted to let you know that we have enough to charge Miss Mitchell with filing a false report with DCFS, which is a misdemeanor. We are also pursuing harassment charges based on the pattern of behavior toward you and other families. The state's attorney has approved the charges, and we will be making an arrest tomorrow morning. An arrest? She is actually going to be arrested. Yes. Given the multiple incidents and the escalating nature of her behavior, including the recent trespassing event, we believe there is sufficient cause. She will be processed and released on bond, but this is serious, Mr. Stevens. If convicted, she could face jail time and significant fines. Thursday morning, I was working at my office when Janet stopped by my desk. Gabriel, you need to see this. She pulled up a local news website on her computer. The headline read, "Former HOA President Arrested for False CPS Report and Harassment." Below it was a photo of Deborah Mitchell being led from her house in handcuffs, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. The article detailed the charges against her, including filing a false report with the Department of Children and Family Services, harassment of multiple families in her neighborhood, and criminal trespass. It mentioned that she had been removed from her position as HOA president and that several families were considering civil suits for damages related to her conduct. "How do you feel?" Janet asked quietly. "Honestly, relieved, and a little sad. She brought this on herself, but it is still someone's life falling apart. She weaponized the child welfare system to harass families and control her neighbors. That is not a small thing, Gabriel. You did the right thing by reporting her, and the police did the right thing by taking this seriously." I nodded, but something still felt heavy in my chest. I had spent my career trying to help families, not destroy them. Even when the family in question had done everything in their power to make my life miserable, the preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I attended, along with 4 other families from the neighborhood who had been victims of Deborah's harassment. She appeared with her attorney, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit, who immediately moved for dismissal of all charges. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Owens, reviewed the evidence and denied the motion. The evidence presented shows a clear pattern of harassment and misuse of the child welfare system. These charges will proceed to trial unless a plea agreement is reached. Deborah's attorney asked for a recess to confer with his client. They spoke in hushed tones in the corner of the courtroom for several minutes, then returned to the podium. "Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a plea of no contest to the charge of filing a false report. In exchange, we request that the harassment charges be dropped and that sentencing include community service rather than jail time." The assistant state's attorney, a young woman named Melissa Torres, stood. "Your Honor, given the serious nature of these offenses and the impact on multiple families, the state requests that any plea agreement include mandatory mental health evaluation and treatment, a permanent restraining order preventing Ms. Mitchell from contacting any of the affected families, and restitution for documented damages including legal fees and other costs incurred by the victims." Judge Owens looked at Deborah. "Miss Mitchell, do you understand that by entering a no-contest plea, you are accepting the consequences of your actions without admitting guilt, but acknowledging that the evidence against you is sufficient for a conviction?" "Yes, Your Honor." Deborah's voice was barely audible. She banged her gavel. "Additionally, Miss Mitchell, I want to be very clear about something. The child welfare system exists to protect vulnerable children from harm. When people misuse that system for personal vendettas or to exercise control over others, they are not only hurting the families they target, they are undermining the entire system and making it harder for social workers to do their jobs and for actual victims to be helped. Your actions were reprehensible, and you should be grateful that the state agreed to a plea that does not include jail time. Deborah nodded, her eyes on the floor. As we filed out of the courtroom, several of the other families stopped to talk to me. The couple whose son played basketball shook my hand. "Thank you for standing up to her. We were too scared to do it ourselves." "You came forward when it mattered," I said. "That took courage too." Outside the courthouse, Linda was waiting. She had attended the hearing but had stayed in the back, not wanting to draw attention. "How do you feel now?" "Like maybe I can finally relax in my own backyard without wondering if someone is watching my kids and taking notes." I took a deep breath of crisp autumn air. Like maybe things can go back to normal. They did not go back to normal immediately. There was paperwork to file documenting my legal fees for restitution. There were neighborhood meetings to elect a new HOA board and revise some of the more oppressive bylaws that Deborah had used as weapons. There were conversations with Marcus and Lily, age-appropriate explanations about why the lady who used to yell at us was not around anymore, and why it was important that Daddy had stood up for what was right even when it was hard. But gradually, life settled into a new rhythm. The swing set stayed in the backyard, and I added a playset with a slide and climbing wall. Linda's roses grew wild and beautiful through the fence into what was now someone else's yard. The new residents of Deborah's house, having moved in with 3 kids of their own, and no interest in filing complaints about vegetation. 6 months after the court hearing, I ran into Amanda Foster at the grocery store. She had been elected as the new HOA president and had already made significant changes to how the board operated. "Gabriel, I wanted to thank you again for everything that happened," she said as we stood in the produce section. "The neighborhood is so much better now. People actually talk to each other instead of living in fear of violation notices. We are planning a community barbecue next month at the park. You should come. We will be there. How is the board working out?" "Great. We have instituted term limits and recall provisions so no one person can ever accumulate that much unchecked power again. We have also simplified the bylaws significantly." Turns out most of the restrictions people thought were required were actually just Deborah's interpretations that had no basis in the actual covenants. She smiled. "Funny how much better things work when you focus on building community instead of controlling it." I thought about that conversation as I drove home, my trunk full of groceries for the week. Control versus community. Fear versus trust. The choice to use power to hurt people or to help them. As a social worker, I saw those choices play out every day in much more serious circumstances than HOA disputes. But the principle was the same. People in positions of authority had a responsibility to use that authority wisely, to prioritize the well-being of the vulnerable, to build up rather than tear down. Deborah Mitchell had failed that test, and the consequences had been appropriate and necessary. But more importantly, the community had come together to reject that kind of leadership and build something better. That was the real victory, not the court case or the restraining order or even the peaceful backyard where my kids could play without someone documenting their every move. The victory was in neighbors looking out for each other, in people finding the courage to speak up against injustice, in a system that, when properly used, could protect the vulnerable and hold the powerful accountable. That Saturday evening, I stood at my kitchen window watching Marcus push Lily on the swing set, while 3 neighbor kids played tag around the playset. Linda was in her garden next door, her roses in full bloom, occasionally glancing over to wave at the kids. Music drifted from someone's backyard a few houses down, and the smell of grilling burgers filled the air. This was what normal looked like. This was what community looked like, and it was worth every difficult moment it had taken to protect it. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Kids are asking when they can come back to the swing set. Think next weekend works," I typed back. "Absolutely. Bring everyone. Linda is making her famous lemonade and the new neighbors want to meet you all." Another text came through, this one from Patricia Chen. "Heard the Mitchell case is closed. Well done standing your ground. The system worked because you made sure it worked. Proud to have you as a colleague." I poured myself a glass of iced tea and headed outside to join the kids. Marcus spotted me and yelled, "Dad, come push us both at the same time." "I do not think physics works that way, buddy, but I will give it a try." As I pushed both swings and listened to my children's laughter mixing with the sounds of the neighborhood coming alive around us, I felt something settle deep in my chest. Peace, maybe, or just the simple satisfaction of knowing I had fought for what mattered and won. The swing set stayed. The kids played. The community healed. And somewhere across town, Deborah Mitchell was hopefully learning that power without compassion is just tyranny in miniature, and that every small kingdom eventually falls to those brave enough to say no. That was the story I would tell Marcus and Lily when they were older and could understand it fully. Not that their dad was a hero or that he had defeated some villain. But that standing up for what is right is not always dramatic or exciting. Sometimes it is just refusing to take down a swing set. Sometimes it is documenting facts and following procedures and trusting that systems, imperfect as they are, can work when good people use them properly. Sometimes it is just being a dad who wanted his kids to have a backyard where they could play without fear. And sometimes that is enough. 3 months later, on a crisp October afternoon, the neighborhood gathered for Amanda's community barbecue at Ridgewood Park. The turnout was incredible. Nearly every family from Maple Ridge Drive and several from surrounding streets. There were bouncy houses for the kids, a volleyball net set up on the grass, and enough food to feed everyone twice over. I manned one of the grills with Robert Chen, flipping burgers and hot dogs while Marcus and Lily ran wild with what seemed like dozens of other children. Vanessa had driven down with my older daughter Sophie, and the 3 kids were inseparable, leading a pack of neighborhood children in an elaborate game that involved the playground equipment, several hula hoops, and rules that made sense only to them. "This is what it should have been all along," Robert said, watching the scene with satisfaction. "A neighborhood where families actually know each other and kids can be kids." "Deborah would have hated this," I observed. "Too much noise, too much chaos, kids running around without structured activities and proper supervision." "Deborah hated joy," Linda said, appearing with a tray of her lemonade. "Some people are only happy when they are making others miserable. Good riddance to her." I had heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Deborah had moved to a condo in downtown Chicago, a high-rise with strict rules and no children allowed. Apparently, she had found her perfect environment. The family that bought her house was wonderful. The parents both teachers who loved the community feel of the neighborhood and had no interest in filing complaints about anyone. As the afternoon turned to evening and the food gave way to desserts and the volleyball game became more competitive, Amanda clinked a glass to get everyone's attention. "I just want to say thank you all for coming today and for making Maple Ridge a real community again. This past year has been challenging, but we have come through it stronger and more connected. Special thanks to Gabriel Stevens, who reminded us all that sometimes doing the right thing means standing up even when it is uncomfortable. There was applause, and I felt my face flush. I nodded acknowledgement but did not say anything. This was not about me being celebrated. It was about all of us choosing to be neighbors instead of strangers living in proximity. As the barbecue wound down and families started packing up to head home, Lily tugged on my hand. "Dad, this was the best day ever. Can we do it again?" "I think we will, sweetheart. I think we will do it a lot." That night, after the kids were in bed and the house was quiet, I sat on my back deck looking at the swing set silhouetted against the darkening sky. Such a simple thing, really. A structure of metal and plastic that cost $300 and took 4 hours to assemble. But it had become a symbol of something much larger. The right to live without harassment, to raise children without fear of malicious interference, to be part of a community based on mutual respect rather than authoritarian control. I thought about Deborah sometimes, wondered if she had gained any insight from what had happened, or if she still believed she had been the victim in all of this. The mental health evaluation ordered by the court had apparently resulted in a diagnosis and treatment plan, but I did not know the details and did not need to. That was her journey now, separate from mine. What I did know was that the child welfare system had worked the way it was supposed to. False reports had been identified and punished. Real concerns had been investigated appropriately. Families had been protected. The system was not perfect, would never be perfect, but it could work when people used it in good faith and held accountable those who tried to weaponize it. As a social worker, that mattered to me deeply. Every day I saw the system at its best and worst, protecting vulnerable children while sometimes overwhelming struggling families with bureaucracy and suspicion. The balance was delicate, the stakes impossibly high. Cases like Deborah's, where someone deliberately abused the system for personal gain, made everyone's job harder and put actual victims at risk. That was why I had not hesitated to file my report, why I had pursued accountability even when it would have been easier to just take down the swing set and avoid the conflict. Because systems only work when people defend their integrity, even at personal cost. My phone lit up with a message from Marcus Wright, my attorney. Final restitution check cleared. Total came to $8,400 covering legal fees for all affected families. Case officially closed. $8,000 that Deborah would be paying back over the course of her probation. Money that would reimburse the families she had harassed for the cost of defending themselves against her attacks. It was not about the money really, but about accountability, about there being real consequences for harmful actions. I sent back a simple, "Thanks for everything, Marcus. Could not have done this without you." His response came immediately. "You did the hard part. I just filed the paperwork. Enjoy your swing set." I smiled at that. Enjoy your swing set. Such a simple phrase, but it captured everything. The freedom to let my kids play. The peace of mind that came from living without constant surveillance and threats. The satisfaction of knowing I had stood my ground and protected not just my family but my entire community. Monday morning came with the first real frost of the season, frost that turned the grass white and made the swing set gleam in the early morning light. I made breakfast for the kids, packed their lunches, and drove them to school while they chattered about the Halloween costumes they were planning. At the office, I had 3 new case files waiting on my desk. A 4-year-old with suspicious bruising. A teenager who had run away from home for the 3rd time. A family living in a car who had been reported by a concerned teacher. Real problems. Real children in need of help. This was my work. This was what mattered. Not HOA disputes or property line arguments. but actual protection of actual vulnerable people. But the experience with Deborah had reminded me why procedural integrity mattered, why documentation and proper channels, and following the rules, were not just bureaucratic obstacles but essential safeguards. It had reminded me that the power I wielded as a social worker was significant and had to be used responsibly, that people's lives could be destroyed by false accusations or sloppy investigations. I opened the first file, began reading the intake report, and started planning my investigation. Every case deserved thoroughness. Every family deserved fairness. Every child deserved protection. That was the real lesson from everything that had happened. Not that I had defeated some HOA tyrant or protected my swing set, but that systems of accountability and protection only work when people commit to using them properly, even when it is difficult, even when it would be easier to look away. 6 months later, on a warm spring afternoon, I received a letter in the mail from an address I did not recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief handwritten note. Mr. Stevens, I am writing to acknowledge that my behavior toward you and your family was inappropriate and harmful. I have been receiving treatment and working to understand why I felt the need to control my environment to such an extreme degree. I do not expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I recognize the damage I caused. I hope you and your children are well. Deborah Mitchell. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the file I kept of all the documentation from the case. I did not know if the apology was genuine or just part of her court-ordered treatment, did not know if Deborah truly understood what she had done, or was simply going through the motions. But I chose to take it at face value, to believe that people could grow and change, that consequences could lead to insight. Maybe Deborah would genuinely do better. Maybe she would not. Either way, she was no longer my problem or my responsibility. I wrote a brief response acknowledging her letter and wishing her well in her continued treatment, then mailed it and put the entire situation behind me. That weekend, we held Marcus's 7th birthday party in the backyard. 16 kids running around the swing set and playset, climbing and sliding and swinging with wild abandon. Vanessa brought Sophie down for the party, and even my parents drove in from Ohio to celebrate with their grandchildren. The cake was chocolate with vanilla frosting, Marcus's favorite, and as we sang happy birthday and he blew out the candles, I looked around at the scene. My family, my neighbors, my community, the life I had fought to protect. Marcus's wish, shouted loud enough for everyone to hear despite tradition, was, "I wish every day could be this fun." Every day is not going to be this fun, I told him later as we cleaned up paper plates and wrapping paper. But that is okay. The regular days are good too. School and homework and just playing in the backyard, all of it is good. Even when that mean lady was being mean, I paused, considering how to answer. Even then, buddy, because standing up to mean people teaches us that we are strong enough to protect what matters. And what matters is family and friends and being kind to each other. You protected us, Dad. I did, and I always will. That is what parents do. He hugged me, all gangly 7-year-old limbs and boundless energy, then ran off to continue playing with his friends. Lily followed, her princess dress covered in chocolate frosting and grass stains, absolutely perfect in her mess. This was the ending. Not dramatic or cinematic, just the quiet satisfaction of a normal life protected and preserved. A swing set in a backyard, kids laughing. A community that had learned to choose connection over control. Sometimes the dragons we fight are not fire-breathing monsters, but middle-aged HOA presidents with too much time and too little perspective. Sometimes the treasure we protect is not gold, but the simple freedom to live without harassment. And sometimes, victory looks like a chocolate-stained princess and a 7-year-old boy who knows his dad will always protect him, swinging in a backyard while neighbors wave and the world spins peacefully on. The swing set stayed. The community thrived. And I went back to my regular work of protecting children who truly needed protecting, secure in the knowledge that I had done the same for my own family when it mattered most. That was enough. That was everything.